Oh folks, welcome back to my shop. This video I'm going to show you how I put together this waterfall table. This is the first attempt I've done at a waterfall table, so maybe you can learn some of the same things I did during this process. The first thing I did was come up with the dimensions. As you can see from this sketch, the table is about 17 inches deep and 19.5 inches off the floor. You might take a look at your situation and make sure there's plenty of room underneath the sofa so that the table supports can slide in underneath. This also makes a very nice end table. So with that, let's get on with the project. This is the board I started with. I have several of these pieces of unknown species. It's quite narrow with a live edge that I have been trying to figure out what to do with. This is either a catapult or a sycamore. The first thing I did was build a 45-degree track for my skill saw. The platform is 1/4 inch hardboard and the track is 3/8 inch plywood. After cutting the pieces to size, I glued and screwed them together. I then set my skill saw at 45 degrees and cut a 45-degree bevel on the track. This will allow me to set the track accurately on the cut line for the waterfall cut. Setting the top and the cutoff track to the side, I went about cutting the rough stock for the frame and leg. This is 3/4 inch stock, cut 1.5 inches thick. I need 2 pieces at 15 inches, 2 pieces at 19.5 inches, 2 pieces at 17 inches, and 3 pieces at 5.5 inches. After all the pieces are cut to length, I mark the ends for mortises. I will be using what I call loose tenons for all the construction joints. Here I am cutting the mortises. They're a 1/4 inch wide, 1 inch deep. I do this with a plunge router about 1/8 of an inch at each pass. Holding the piece is a jig that I use quite often. It's simply 2 1x4s screwed together at 90 degrees. One side which I can clamp to the workbench, the other side sticking up which I can affix various cleats and clamps to. Back to the waterfall itself. Because the piece was too long for my use and all edges were rough cut with either a bandsaw or a chainsaw or rough edge, I used a handsaw to try to duplicate that kind of edge. Here I am measuring for my first 45-degree cut to make the waterfall connection, 17 inches in. On my first cut, I lined the bottom of the 45-degree bevel on my track with the cut line on the piece. The next cut is made on the downfall portion of the waterfall, aligning the bottom of the track bevel with the edge of the previous cut. Now that I had the 2 cuts made, I needed to figure out a way to clamp these together while the glue dried. Here's some pictures of some clamping cauls that I made out of 2x4 stock. It's easier to show you pictures of these clamping cauls than to explain to you how I actually put them together. Instead of gluing these clamping cauls directly to the material, as I've seen others do, and then chiseling the waste away, I'm using drawer liner or router pads to keep the cauls from slipping during clamping. Prior to assembly, I cut slots for 2 number 20 biscuits for alignment and strength. So here's the glue up process. I think if I had to do it again, I'd bevel the insides of my clamping cauls so that I wouldn't have an interference and could possibly get them closer to the joint itself. Here's the finished joint prior to finishing. Finally, I added a small square block as an angle support to stiffen up the joint. Remember, this needs only to support itself. This is not a load-bearing member. Now back to the assembly of the frame and legs. First I need to cut tenons. I do this from stock that I keep that matches the diameter of the 1/4 inch router bit. Glue up was pretty straightforward. I did it in 2 phases. I did the side pieces first and then assembled them to make the full frame. A couple of notes on the loose tenons. I have a very snug fit on the thickness. I make sure the mortises have plenty of depth so I don't get hung up that way, and I also make sure I've got plenty of width so that I can have a little bit of play to make sure alignment comes out good. Prior to final assembly, I put 2 coats of BioShield hard oil number 9 on both the Waterfall and the frame. This has become my go-to finish. It's actually a floor finish and designed for high use areas with high moisture such as bathrooms and kitchens. Well, that's it, folks. My first attempt at waterfall construction. I'm very pleased at the way it came out. I hope you enjoyed it, and most important, hope you learned something. Hit that subscribe button, and remember, happy woodworking.